Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains, episode number 992. This is the pre-show. This is for the 20th of January, 2025. And if you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider over about 10 minutes. We'll start the show in about 10 minutes. But hey, don't miss the pre-show because this is the magical, marvelous part of the program where we typically do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time say outrageous things. So we got a lot to talk about tonight. Obviously, number one, we have potentially an historic winter storm for the Gulf Coast, Blizzard Beach, Houston, New Orleans, Mobile, Biloxi, Gulfport, Pensacola. Number two, we lost a giant in the science of meteorology in recent days, Dr. Chuck Doswell. And he had a really big influence on me. And I will just say that basically most everything I have learned about severe local convective storms came from that man. His blood, in a way, runs through my veins, and over the last 15 years, we became good friends, and I cherish our relationship, our times together. And obviously, we didn't spend a lot of time together because of his retirement and what I do for a living, but at conferences and other things, it was just great. We had so many laughs. And of course, he's been on the show a lot. We're also going to talk about the fact that one major broadcast group decided to lay off every single television meteorologist in their group for a centralized solution. And I've got some things to say about that. But let's. I see Harold Brooks on the show here. It's going to be a good show. Just strap in. Yeah, and again, I'll save most of the comments on these topics for the show that begins here at the top of the hour. But a lot of new people are probably watching this that have never watched before. And let me just say up front that this show is not designed for Joe Q public. This show is designed for weather geeks, dweebs, nerds, dorks, and weenies. Because we talk about things in the weather world, and sometimes it's inside baseball. You know, and we've been doing this show for, in fact, we are coming up in 1 week. 1 week, we turn 19 years old. We've been doing WeatherBrains for 19 years, every week, which also means Show 1000 is coming up. And Show 1000 is coming up, I want to say, on the 17th of March. It is, I have it in my calendar because we're going to do the show live. And that morning, I've actually got a school program in Foley, Alabama, which is near Gulf Shores, the beach. And I do believe, I don't know if I can announce the location yet, but I will be driving from that location to another location for the 1000 episode special we have on March 17th. I'll let Bill Murray kind of announce the plans for that. But anyway, if you're new here, welcome. And we'd love to have you watch, listen. Most people listen, by the way. This started off as an audio-only podcast. And to this day, about 75% of the people listen instead of watch, but some do watch. Some watch live, and some get to hear the pre-show. So thank you. But we're going to get into all these important topics soon. Kim, I see Dr. Brooks on the show. I'm excited. This is going to be, whenever Dr. Brooks is here, I feel good.
As you should, right, Harold? Oh, you're sadly muted. We didn't get whatever that quip was.
Well, I'm ready for it. Where are we going to dinner, James?
Oh, man. The last place we went, that's where I want to go. That was outstanding. Gosh, goodness gracious. Kim, if you ever go to St. Louis with this man, he is Elvis. He is absolutely Elvis. I mean, it's just like, everybody's goo-gooing and gaga-ing, and wow. So
I had to send him an email that we weren't coming up for Christmas.
I'm sure a lot of disappointment. Yeah, it's the family. It's where you're from.
and the restaurant is awfully special. Let's just say that.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Oh, goodness gracious. I was there last. I did a weather seminar for the weather people at KMOV Television, which is Channel 4. Mm-hmm. And the general manager said, if you do a weather seminar for my people for a day or two, I will get you some good Cardinals tickets. So it was a good trade. It was a great trade.
Not a bad trade.
But we got to go back. That was good. And I think who was with us? Bill Murray, wasn't he with us on that?
Yeah, and Scott
expedition that
Martin.
night? Yeah, that's right, Scott Martin. That was good.
Yep.
All right, so we're gonna, and again, we can't get into the official show until we get
Sure.
the television. TV hits at the top of the hour. This
Sure.
is the, so if you ever need to say anything totally obnoxious, this is your chance to do it. This,
Well, I thought we were talking about Doswell tonight.
Yeah.
And we're going to eliminate the obnoxious
Wow.
just before the show starts. I'm not sure why I'm
Wow.
here.
yeah, there you go. Oh yeah. Oh boy, everybody's got some Doswell stories. I know I do. So I cannot wait, and I hate that Marshall. Where's Bill? Tim flying somewhere to
Dubai.
Right? Yeah, Dubai.
Dubai.
Of all things.
I hope he's
Yeah.
on one of those Emiratis 380s.
I hope he's
to fly
not.
one of those.
I hope he's on like a Boeing 737.
Yeah, 738.
In the middle seat of
737,
every
yeah.
single flight he's on. Yeah, and it's
No.
like it's an 18-leg flight to get there. You know, that's what I'm on.
Right. Yes, it's funny. I was messaging him on Facebook to reach out for this show, and the last time that he and I had chatted there was when the last time he'd been on the show with Chuck a couple of years ago,
Wow.
and he was talking about how emotional Chuck was, and we were talking about how even then we were noticing just some changes in him. And it's one of those things that when you know someone really well, it's so hard to watch, but I'm so glad we have that last show. It was a great moment to capture.
Yeah, there's some of the most
And
amazing
thanks
shows.
thanks to Jen, we have some audio clips we're going to be playing from past Doswell appearances here. But yeah, we have to hold the good stuff. Remember, hold the good stuff until the show starts. We got looks like 2 minutes here.
And thank you, Kim,
again,
for making this show happen with Dr. Brooks tonight. So
Yeah,
was
as much as
wonderful.
the hard work was me texting him saying, "Hey, you want to come talk?"
Yeah, that probably was pretty hard.
It was a real hard sell to get Harold here. It turns out that getting the other folks here was a little bit harder with the Dubai flight, and then I really wanted Nate Johnson. We were chatting with Oklahoma James, who may or may not be connecting to audio for like
he's been connecting to audio for 20 minutes here.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like
James and I were chatting with Nate, and I offered to have him on to help memorialize, because he's just he's sort of everybody's neighborhood pastor, let's be real, and it'd be a really nice former weather brain like guest weather brain appearance, but he unfortunately caught AMS plague. So we're rolling, and Harold I think needs no assistance really with this.
No. We're in good shape here. There's James. He just popped up after connecting for 20 minutes. He must be on the 1200 baud modem.
Hey,
TV
James,
station.
I'm going to be at St. Pius X on Friday.
Oh, no kidding.
Cool. So I'll be get done about 1:00 in the afternoon.
You want to grab lunch?
We could do that, or come by. Yeah, come by and see what's going on. I'll give you the exact schedule when I get it. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Shoot me a message.
Yep.
And just so everybody will know, Neil said he should be able to join us, but he's going to be about an hour late, Dr. Jacobs. So he will be here shortly. So let me get the recorders going here, because we're 23 seconds out, and we can start these. Track number 1 is rolling. Track number 2 is rolling. And in 12 seconds, we can get this thing flying here. So be sure y'all can hear this. Yep, I think we're good. Welcome to our television viewers. It is Monday night, January 20th, May 20th. I'm dreaming of a warmer month. So we do have a Gulf Coast winter storm, and we're going to talk about that on the show. So just hang tight, and a lot to talk about tonight. So, but let's get it going, because we have so much to talk about. So here we go. This is the produced version in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
WeatherBrains episode number 992. That was Bill Curtis, the Bill Curtis. And if he says you're a big deal, maybe we are. I don't know. 992. We're getting so close to episode number 1000. This is for the 20th of January, 2025. And we are 1 week away from our 19th birthday. 19 years of WeatherBrains. They said it wouldn't last. What do they know? They know absolutely nothing. But we have a lot of things to talk about tonight. Some very important topics, but let's kind of quickly go around the horn. And let's see, Jen, you are in the deep Arctic cold. How cold is it now?
It is 4 right now, and wind chill, about 10 below. The coldest we get is tomorrow night, close to 10 below, with a wind chill 20 below. So then we move back up. So just a quick freeze here, but I have not ventured outside. I will have to tomorrow, but I just kind of hunker in and wait for this to get on out of here. So
even down here at this latitude, we stayed below freezing all day today, and we have a winter storm warning in effect for the Gulf Coast. How about that? Mobile, New Orleans, Houston, Lake Charles, Pensacola. Goodness great. And we'll talk about this in detail here just a little bit. And I will say I'm wearing my cargo shorts here. I'm afraid to stand up because you know what happens. You have to be sure that your pants are on, and number two, that your zipper's fixed and everything. But let's see. There we go. Cargo shorts. I wear cargo shorts when I think my limit's maybe 10 below zero. If it's colder than 10 below zero, I might put on some long pants. But I have not worn blue jeans in probably 20 years. I just don't wear long pants unless I have to do it for television or something. So
I wonder
I'm
who
a
was buying
cargo
those at
shorts.
Costco.
It's me. I mean, come on. What you need to do is watch the Mike Leach video on cargo shorts. That is the greatest. He gets it. This man understands me. That cargo shorts video is just too good. James A. in Tulsa. So how cold are you tonight?
We are going down to 8. It is snowing right now and 24 degrees. It is not my favorite weather.
Okay. Well, yeah, we had that good little snow event here, a couple of weeks ago. 10 days ago. In fact, we still had snow in my yard 3 days ago. It's finally gone away now, but we've got this next one coming in tomorrow, which should be mainly south of here. But yeah, 'tis the season. Let's see, Kim, how cold are you in Oklahoma, where you are, Norman?
Yeah, geez, here in Norman, we're 23, I guess, according to the Mesonet. And we will get, if James up in Tulsa is getting down to about 8, we'll probably be 9-10 degrees here. So balmy comparatively. Balmy.
Hey, tropical heat wave. I think our coldest morning here is going to be Wednesday. We'll probably see Huntsville and some of the cities up in the Tennessee Valley. They might do 8 or 9. Down here, we'll probably do 10 or 12. But Bill Murray, let's get this on the road here. We got so much to talk about. We want to talk about the TV thing first, and then we're going to get into Dr. Doswell here. But I'll let you bring in our esteemed, honored guest.
Yeah, tonight, kind of a somber night, James. I always have so many wonderful memories of Dr. Chuck Doswell, and when we received the news over the weekend, of course, we were all heartbroken to see his passing. Just a true great in our field. And, of course, Dr. Kim Cloko McLean was extremely close to Chuck, and she reached out on Saturday morning and asked if she could invite Dr. Harold Brooks and a couple of folks. So, Kim, I'll toss it over to you and let you introduce our good friend Harold and give the disposition of our other guests that we would have loved to have had with us tonight as well. And then we'll kick it back to James after you introduce Harold, because we're going to do a little editorial first, and then we can
we're going to get the editorial out of the way first, then we'll get into Chuck. So, but Kim, let's formally introduce.
We'll share our thoughts on Chuck.
Yeah, what an appropriate night to talk about Chuck. It feels like we've reached a real benchmark for the field, and his passing happening at the same time as this, it almost seems really fitting. So I am excited for both things tonight. So tonight, who we do have on the show with us is my good friend, Dr. Harold Brooks, a senior scientist at the National Severe Storms Laboratory here in Norman. And Harold is here to share decades of remembrances about Chuck. I know that his passing is something that maybe hasn't been a surprise to some of us who've been watching watching him, and Harold has been in particular very close with him this whole time, but it doesn't make it any easier. So Harold, we're just really grateful that we have you here tonight.
It's good to be here. I mean, this is, gosh, Chuck's why I'm in Norman. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. And we had offices or desks within 5 feet of each other for more than a decade. Had lunch together almost every day for a few years, and did some pretty decent work together, and hopefully influenced some other things that also worked out well. And there was a lot of non-work stuff. We're both of us had a grandparent born in Sweden. We shared stories about lutefisk and being forced to eat it as a child.
As one does.
And breaking the generational trauma by not sharing it with our children. But a lot of stuff that went on with Chuck over the years that I felt like he's, my wife made a comment that when she shared what I had shared the other night on Facebook, she said, "Was it okay that I called him your best friend?" And I'm going, I can't think of any, post college, I can't think of anybody else I've spent more time with and talked to more with and about more stuff than Chuck Doswell. So it's, I know there are going to be times in the next, in years when it's like, I wish I could tell Chuck about this and see how he would react and what he would think about doing stuff. But let's get on with the show.
Oh, sure. Well, obviously, with that intro, we're all looking very much forward to what you have to share tonight. And I'm glad that Jen has a bunch of clips of Chuck to tee up to mix in with everything. This should be a delight. I will say I tried to get some of the folks that Harold and Chuck were involved with in early lab days. They called themselves the BFD. Harold will describe what that is, but that included folks like Tim Marshall, Dave Stensrud. Tim is unfortunately on a plane literally right now in the air flying to Dubai because Tim Marshall is Tim Marshalling. But he would have been delighted to be here for this. And he's also heartbroken over Chuck's passing. And I also had invited Nate Johnson, a former weather brain, who's just so wonderful at doing things like memorializing people, and also was very touched by Chuck. And, as a early broadcast meteorologist. And so I think there are infinite people who would have wanted to share stories tonight. And it was honestly just a challenge of, okay, I don't want to issue an open call. We would round. So I think what is really wonderful is that we have Harold, who can give us, I think, a really wonderful and clear picture of so many facets of Chuck, and that we'll all add our remembrances. And with that, Bill, let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. We'll come back to Chuck, but there's a lot to digest that's gone on in our field, isn't there?
Yes. And when we all received the news last week, I don't think we were shocked or surprised, but, still, when it happens, you're still, it hits hard. And James was in the paper today in Birmingham, if you call it a paper still, that he would be on the air tonight at 7:00. So, James, we don't want to probably bury the lead too far tonight, but I think you're on the dais tonight to give your thoughts on what this means. It looks like we're watching the passing. You've been warning about it for years, but we're sort of watching the passing of an industry here in a lot of ways. And how do we move forward from that?
And first off, thanks for letting me talk about this up front. I thought we'd get this out of the way because so many people have asked me to comment on this. And I told every one of them, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday, watch the show Monday. So a lot of people are watching. And for those that don't know the situation, so there's a fairly large broadcast television group, Allen Media, and they laid off every single meteorologist, to my knowledge, every one of them at all of their local stations. I want to say they have 20, 21, 22 stations around the country. They have two in my area. They have one in Huntsville, Alabama, one in Tupelo, Mississippi, but they've got them as far north as Wisconsin. They've got some out west, and they're gone. And what they're going to do is have the weather for those stations provided for them from the Weather Channel, which Allen owns. And so it's going to be hubbed out. And so just a few thoughts on the whole thing. And number one, some people are just furious that they feel like those local meteorologists are part of their family. The meteorologists, they've been in their child's school to teach them weather. That they have held their hand through violent tornado outbreaks or vicious floods or whatever high impact event for years. And just like that, they're gone. Just like that, they're out of here. And I feel so badly for those that have lost their jobs. I've been so blessed. Most everybody loses their job multiple times if you do what I do for a living. And I've been pretty blessed. And I don't know exactly what it feels like, but I've had some heartbreak in my life personally. And I know that it's traumatic when you lose a job, and it just happens like that. And I'm so sorry for those men and women that have lost their positions in broadcast meteorology, and they're not doing the soul searching. What I'm going to do? How do I provide for my family? Where do I go from here? Is it over? And I hate that. I just hate that. But having said that, I want everybody to hear this. I'm so positive on the future of what we're going to do. There will be a lot of short-term pain, and this is an example of that. But there will be long-term gain in that the products and services we deliver will still be there on different platforms, but in a much more efficient way. What I have done, I have been on this horse for 47 years. I started doing weather on television. This is how old I am. In June of 1978, June the 26th, of 1978, I walked into WCFT, Channel 33 in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They paid me $1.85 an hour to do the weather. But they paid me to do what I love to do. I couldn't believe it. It was a dream. And every day I cannot wait to come to work. And here I am all these years later and nothing's changed. But here's what's happened. And I won't make this long because we got to talk about Dr. Doswell. The days of linear television are over. They're just over. When people go home, people that are watching this show, listening to this show, what do you watch? You're going to watch Netflix. You're going to watch Hulu. You're going to watch Amazon Prime. You're going to watch YouTube. Most people are watching this on YouTube right now. You don't watch linear television. For years and years, our primetime ratings were 20, 25, 26 shares. In some cases, 40 and 50 shares. And now they're ones and twos. The audience is just tiny. And so that model has gone away. And those that use the traditional Ron Burgundy newscast, they're getting old. Most of them are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they're starting to die. And the bottom line is we are in a world that are featuring products of a bygone era. And they're going away. And that's okay. It's okay. But for all of us, I think it's a wake-up call that we have to, number one, be cognizant of that. We have to be where people are, and we have to understand how they consume media and provide products and services in that world that they can consume on a regular basis and during high-impact events. And I love this generation. I love this generation that's about to come out of college. And I think they will lead the way in building that new model. So we're not going away. And I'm hoping that for a lot of these men and women that have lost their jobs, they will look at these opportunities. So having said that, I just want people to understand that as horrible as this is, in the long term, I'm excited. Now, can the Weather Channel adequately do tornado warning coverage, live tornado warning coverage for Tupelo, Mississippi, Huntsville, Alabama? I guess I really don't know until it happens, but I will say this. You cannot do severe weather right unless you understand the people, the culture, the geography, and the microclimate of the market where you serve. And you can't do that from a distance. I could do a tornado outbreak in Nebraska, but I would be horrible at it. I don't understand the people, the culture, the geography. I'm just looking at maps and names. I've never worked an outbreak in Nebraska before. You can't beat that. And I think a hub will not be able to do that successfully. So I think there's always going to be local meteorologists. but I want everybody to understand that I'm positive for the future. Short-term pain, long-term gain. So out of everybody on the show here, James Adelot in Tulsa is in my world, and I have to pitch to him for his thoughts on this because I might have made him mad, but he's a lot smarter than I am. So James, what are your thoughts on the Allen media situation?
I mean, it hit me pretty hard. I mean, we'd like to put in a few more years in this industry. The people just starting out, the young people on my team would like to make a career out of this as well. And again, I don't think it's any secret that there may have been financial issues with that company as well. Not saying, I mean, I just think money was tight. I think he acquired a lot of stations in a short amount of time, most small and mid-sized markets. One thing that I do fear out of this for the talent, at least, is you've got a lot of small market talent that are out of jobs now because the majority of those stations seem to be in small and low end to medium markets. And the Weather Channel will have to staff up a little bit, but I think they're going to select from the cream of that crop. And a lot of these people won't have chances for those jobs. So I know a lot of TV stations, and you've talked about this too, James, in Birmingham, that you have trouble getting people to apply for jobs. And I do too. Thankfully, knock on wood, I won't have to do this for a while. But, this maybe changes that dynamic temporarily, that we have some more people applying to these jobs. I don't know. But I think you're right. We're in a process of change. I know other television station groups understand that local weather is the bell cow of their news product. And I think some of them are struggling to understand the rationale behind this as well.
And let me just say this too. I work for a big company called Sinclair Broadcast Group, and they've been so supportive of me. They leave me alone. They give me the freedom to be me. I walk to the beat of a different drummer. I'm an outlier in so many different ways, but they have been so supportive, and they have literally left me alone in order for me to be successful. And they've given me the tools I need to be successful. And understand, this doesn't affect my company at all. I'm here. I've got a great relationship with Sinclair. This is a group called Allen, and I do think you're right, James, and that most likely some advisor told Byron Allen, you need to buy a bunch of these TV stations. And he just got some bad advice. So you borrow a bunch of money, you buy a bunch of TV stations at a time when linear television is dying.
And interest
and it was
rates
just
are
a
going
bad
up.
investment. Right.
So,
interest rates are creeping up, and you've got to retire the debt, and you've got to service the debt. And all of a sudden, if the numbers don't match, you've got some choices, hard choices to make. And in my opinion, you cannot cut your way to success. You've got to innovate your way to success in a changing business model, and you've got to do this innovation thing. And I understand some cuts are necessary, but again, it doesn't affect me for those that are asking at all. And again, I so am deeply appreciative of the support of Sinclair, and they didn't tell me to say that. Nobody's holding a gun to my head. It's been a joy to work here, and it is a joy to work here, but it's changing. And we've all got to change. And I think my company understands that. Sinclair understands that. And most of these big groups, I think they understand that. We can't go back to 1985 and Ron Burgundy and Veronica Corningstone and Brick Tamlin and Champ Kind, like the movie Anchorman. And I was there for those years. But that's the one more thing, and I'll stop talking about it, James. What bothers me, I do not and I cannot leave a dumpster fire for the next generation. These young college kids coming out of meteorology. They're brilliant. And it's hard. You think, your major maybe was hard, but goodness, and these kids are making minimum wage if they can find a job at all. And most of them now aren't even interested in broadcast television. They're going to go work for the Weather Service because of the dying business model. But I want to give them something that's vibrant, something that's going to grow, and something that's going to be around for a long time. And I think we're in that transition now where the old model is dying and the new model will emerge. And so, I want to be a part of that. I want to help build the new models. So for those asking, no, I'm not retiring anytime soon. My plans, my plan, it's this, to drop dead while I'm on that green wall out there doing weather during a tornado outbreak. I just don't have any interest to retire. I'm energized. I feel better now than I felt physically when I was 30 years old. I feel better mentally than when I was 30 years old, my cognition. And so I'm not going away. And again, if maybe Sinclair does decide next week to do something with us, that's fine. It's going to be okay. So the bottom line is, Bill Murray, I didn't mean to be so talkative here, but I just want to know people to know that this is hard, but it's part. And every business changes. I don't care what business you're in. Every business changes, and you've got to roll with the changes. And for those that are willing to roll with the changes, I think they're going to be fine. And for those that lost their job, if any of us can do anything to help, please get in touch with us. You know, I like Rick Smith. I'm worried about the mental health of those practitioners that do what I do for a living. This ain't easy. It's not. You work horrible hours. You don't sleep. You deal with trolls and haters, and you have busted forecasts, and you know it's hard. And then all of a sudden you lose your job. So if anybody that lost a job with Alan just wants to reach out and talk with any of us on the show, we're here. I would love to talk you through things. So having said that, Bill and Kim, I'll toss it over to you because we got to talk about Dr. D.
You know, there's a couple of panelists who really want to chime in on this because you've raised so many good things, and we won't linger on it for too long. But we have some really interesting perspectives on this panel. Jen, you mentioned that in radio, you've been working under a shifting model for a very long time. And some of what TV is about to experience is something that you've experienced. Tell us a little bit of your thoughts.
Yeah, so I have been a hub for weather for 27 years. I have worked for a radio network. And I've actually experienced being let go. So I've experienced the whole, what am I going to do now? You know, this is all I've ever done. What do you do? I'll first say that it is very difficult to broadcast from Ohio to Portland, Oregon, and I've done tornado outbreaks in Kansas. I've done hurricane coverage for New Orleans and have continued to do it for 27 years. And you can do it. Okay. So the model is there. And so what I see, what he's going to probably try to do is invoke some kind of like a radio network model to television, but it's so different. It's one thing for me to do a radio forecast that's 20 to 30 seconds long for a radio station, and they've never hired a local meteorologist, and I am their local meteorologist. That's how they market me, and I am their voice, and I focus in on them. It is very difficult for me to, I think I'm down to about 65 cities around the country that I'm currently doing, but you have to do that many because radio can't pay you to be their lone meteorologist. So there's a balancing act. The difference between radio and television is humongous. First of all, for TV, you're doing much longer hits. You are building that repertoire with folks, and the severe weather is what a lot of people still go to for local TV. For local radio, we have more competition there because a lot of times they are streaming local TV on the local radio. And so they don't need me. They just want me as their meteorologist to broadcast the weather and be that voice for them to, you know, be the warm basket of kittens that Bill likes to call me and smile and, you know, be happy and, you know, tell people what's going to happen during their day. But they will call on me. But do you think I do severe weather for 65 cities across the country? No way. There is absolutely no way I could do that. And I don't think it's attainable unless they hire a huge staff to be able to do that. On the TV side, it's just too difficult to do. And so you have to have that local entity where people trust you. And you can't, I also don't do regional forecasts. So I don't know how they're going to market it. I don't know if they're going to do like a regional, you know, central Mississippi forecast or what have you. And that way it's marketed on different channels. I do the local forecast for each of the cities. I only do regional if it's like a Mississippi Public Broadcasting that I'm on. And that's very difficult to do. You have 39 seconds to tell the forecast for the entire state of Mississippi. So I've learned how to do it. You do it the best that you can. I would never do this for television. And so that's just my perspective. But my heart breaks for those who have lost their job because they poured their energy into these markets and getting to know them and knowing the nuances of the roads and the locations and the idiosyncrasies of their weather patterns and all that. And my heart breaks for them. And as someone who has been through a layoff and not knowing what I'm going to do, it's a very scary time, but there's also hope. And as you look back, you'll see, okay, things happen for a reason and you step forward. And as James, I will echo what James said, you know, any ways that we can help. You know, that's why we're such a close knit community in the weather world, that we want to help each other and help people figure out their next steps. So those are just my few of my thoughts, Kim.
Yeah, and I'll jump on that too. And I think what makes this harder, and I think most people in this field are pretty empathetic. And I think most people in this field are in this field because it is not hanging fenders on an assembly line. And not to denigrate anybody that works on an assembly line at all, but we're in this almost like clergy. This is in our hearts. We have a service mentality. As James said, the hours are awful. Nobody else would put up with this. But we answer the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, or we're ready to come in at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I think that's what part of what makes this hurt even more for those people affected is that we have that same heart. I mean, we're here to serve people. We're not in TV because it's TV. Maybe some people are that aren't in weather, but you're going to be miserable if you select meteorology and your heart is not in this as a service to people. And I mean, there's nobody on this panel that's not empathetic and has this in their heart. This isn't a 9 to 5 job. And I think that's, that kind of makes this hurt a little bit more. And not to mention the fact that you get rid of your local people. And as Kim would say, the nuts and bolts of the science of this, the credibility of the person communicating emergency information is extremely important in the decision to take protective action. It's time and time again, it's proven. So over.
Nope, that's what I'm thinking about. Warnings in particular, they're not just a technology, they're a social process. It's all those things of trust and relationships. And this is why meteorologists, when you guys would join your stations, one of the very first things you do is learn how to pronounce every town, because it's these things that really, really matter to people. And James, Span, it's one of the things that has made you so remarkable and so important in Alabama, how much you've gotten to know the local geography. But the local geography of our media landscape is changing, especially with the introduction of this whole virtual world, which is kind of like the Wild West right now. There's a lot of innovation, Span, like what you're saying, and a lot of dismantling of what's gone on in the terrestrial geography. And, that's not just us. It's been happening across the different kinds of media landscapes, from newspapers to television, even basic cable. I think that there's a real shift into this very interesting, unmanageable world of the internet and everything that comes with it and all the platforms that proliferate there. Even this TikTok conversation that's going on right now, it boils down to geography of the virtual world and how it connects to the physical world. And it is a complicated thing to think about and to manage on so many fronts. So I appreciate, Span, your optimism for us innovating. I think I needed to hear that, and I'm sure a lot of people needed to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any wrap up thoughts you want to share as we go into talking about Chuck?
No. And again, listen, I want everybody to just understand that I still to this day can't wait to come to work every day. I love everything I do, from the old school television newscast. I'll be on at 5, 6, and 10, to delivering a short version on TikTok for younger people. I was on TikTok this morning. We have a high impact winter storm event. And we just have to. And the one thing I would encourage all of the broadcast meteorologists to do is just build your brand. And you can do that now. So if something happens to you, you've got that brand that you can take with you wherever you wind up going. And if you go it alone, you can do that too. So again, please feel encouraged if you were laid off. And again, if you need to talk with any of us, don't hesitate to reach out. So enough said, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for raising it. And if there are folks who have things they want to share and bring to the table, this isn't done. I think there's going to be a lot to come with that topic. So something we'll also talk about in future years. With that, let's go, I think, back to the introduction of the show. We started to talk a little bit about friend to many, including everyone here on this show, Chuck Doswell. And with us, we have Harold Brooks from the National Severe Storms Laboratory, who had the opportunity to work so closely alongside him for many years. Harold, can you tell us a little bit about Chuck's? Let's start from just a little bit of what you know of his early days and what compelled him to come into the field of meteorology.
Well, I mean, Chuck grew up in the Chicago suburbs, Villa Park. There's still a pizza place open that he used to go to a lot and talked about. And I think a lot, Chuck was curious about the world around him and how it worked. And I think fundamentally that's how he got into weather. This was this is the world around him, and this is interesting and stuff that he cared about. He did his undergraduate at Wisconsin, and came down to Oklahoma to do his PhD or his graduate work with Yoshi Sasaki, and actually did objective analysis stuff for his PhD. He did a lot of applied math kinds of things for his PhD, and while he was here, he started chasing and storms. You do that for a while, and storms get into you. And he was chased for decades with Al Mohler back from the days when they were graduate students. He liked to refer to it, he got an all expenses paid vacation to Southeast Asia for a couple of years along the way. Was in the quartermaster group in the northeastern part of South Vietnam. He says that apparently the officers didn't trust them a whole lot because they were given guns, but they weren't given bullets. And I think Chuck said he thinks the officers are really, really, really afraid that they were going to use the bullets on them if they give them actually ammunition. I think it was like one day they were given the North Vietnamese got close enough that they were actually given ammunition, but they didn't actually reuse it. And he came back and finished the PhD with Yoshi. And I remember he said he created his first job out of graduate school, and that was doing techniques development work at the National Severe Storms Forecast Center in the Severe Local Storms Unit. He was their first techniques development meteorologist and did some forecasting, but also was doing active, research that was directly tied to operations and operational forecasting. Joe Schaefer was his supervisor at the time, and he worked a lot with Les Lemon. There's somebody else from, did a lot of good work and did radar stuff. And I think the biggest thing out of those early years was Chuck writing a 3-volume or 2-volume thing on convective meteorology. And I remember when I started at my PhD at Illinois, I was given those volumes to learn it all. And Chuck then went out to Chuck occasionally had problems with management. He decided that he and Dr. Schaefer did not get along sufficiently well to live in the same state. And so he moved to Colorado out to one of our sister laboratories in Boulder, and was out there for several years and started working with Bob Maddox. Was still doing severe weather stuff, but became interested in flash flooding in the aftermath of Big Thompson. And when Bob Maddox became the lab director in 1985, he talked Chuck into moving to Norman. And that was his first hire. Ironically, I think one of those things that, the last hire that Ed Kessler did before he left the lab was Dave Stensrud. And Stensrud actually worked at NSSL for one day that Ed Kessler was the director. And so he came in and nobody had given him anything to do. And so Bob kind of took him on and then later put him together with Chuck and with Bob Davies Jones, who had come to the lab in 1970. And then there's and that's the beginning of Chuck in Norman. And he then came along and gave me He's the one who got me to come to Norman in a really bizarre set of circumstances in some ways. And I remember when I arrived in Norman, there was a little office area that had Davies Jones and Stensrud and Chuck in it, and they basically gave me a desk in there, and my bookshelf actually sat on the desk because there wasn't room on the floor for it. And people would have to go by. I would have to scoot up to my desk if any of those other three guys came into the area, and I was there for a couple of years, and then we finally got a little bit of remodeling done, and they put Bob and me and Chuck and Dave in a row inside the little area next to a window next to each other, and on the other side, through the years, we had John Cortinas, Eric Rasmussen, Jeff Trapp, Todd Crawford, all were over there in that little area, and that was what was the BFD, the Bozos Forbidden Division. One of the things that I bonded with Chuck over that had nothing to do with work was that we were both we discovered during my job talk when I came down to Norman to give my job talk, we discovered we were both fans of the Firesign Theater, a 1960s comedy group, and one of their big routines was about I think we're all bozos on this bus, and all of that, and there would be somebody who would be shouting "No bozos," and so Chuck had gotten a bumper sticker from the Firesign Theater's "Bozos Forbidden," and we put that up in the office, and that was how the BFD came about, and we were, that was a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, I just reflecting myself on the legacy of that group of people, because I know he influenced you, he brought you in. I'm sure that there were pieces of that entrainment that happened with all of those people. And I think you just described so much of the meteorology house that built me. I had Jeff Trapp as a professor at Purdue. I was there when he first joined the faculty, and he was very influential for me. I subsequently worked for John Cortinas at NOAA headquarters, and I am so blessed to call you and Chuck friends, and Eric Rasmussen too. And you guys have deeply influenced me. So to just think about, and that's just one person. That's just one little me. And the whole pipeline of our field. I mean, there's a culture that was born there that has pervaded our field. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is that, and I'll admit that, this is basically the 1990s. We were all in this little area, and good stuff's happening. You don't necessarily fully appreciate what an extraordinary situation is. I mean, I knew I had DJ on one side and Chuck on the other side. And boy, those are two of the brightest guys I've ever known in my life, and in incredibly different ways. And I'm just kind of hanging on for dear life to kind of, do my bit. And then you kind of realize, after a decade, it's like, that was good. I imagine that's kind of like, when you think of sports teams that are extraordinarily good, and while you're just playing to win this game today. And then all of a sudden you look back when you're getting ready to retire and you go, oh my gosh, not very many people got to do that actually, and got to have that experience. And just the whole thing with, we had all the stupid stuff that went on. We had for a while, we have Chuck and I as half Swedes, and we have Stensrud and Eric Rasmussen as half Norwegian, so we could have lots of Scandinavian wars going on within the group, and Davies Jones with the hyphen, we just called him Hyphen, and Chuck. If you visited Chuck's office in the lab for years, there would be a cricket wicket with no stumps on it, no bales on it, just the three stumps sticking up there, and he would ask people, "Why is that in my office?" This is sort of one of those cognitive tests, and nobody knew the answer until I told some incoming undergraduate or summer student about it, so they could come in and go, oh, well, it's obvious because you're Charles A. Doswell the third, and that's the three. That's what it looks like. And I got called the Piker because H.E. Bailey Turnpike, southwest out of Oklahoma City, that thing, and so the H.E. Brooks, H.E. Bailey, that became me. And we did a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with science, but we talk about relationships, and it was like I think we were all so comfortable with each other, and we knew each other's strengths. Bob Davies Jones is the best theoretician I've ever known, best theoretician sphere storms I've ever had. I mean, that's just not even a question. And if you had a real hard math problem, you go ask DJ about it, and he kind of go, okay, and he'd come back a day later, and here's this elegant solution. And so I think it was a wonderful time. And I think the big thing was that, I think if there was one thing I would describe Chuck's view of the world, and this is where his connection earlier with Bob Maddox had really, this was what made them tight, was a belief in quality and doing quality work. I mean, I remember Chuck talking about reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Persig about quality, and I may be committed to quality. And the fact that what goes on in meteorology and forecasting is incredibly hard. And if you want to be good at it, you have to know everything about everything. And you can be somewhat successful by not being able to do everything, but you're essentially choosing that this is an avenue I'm just not going to be able to exploit. I can't do partial differential equations as well as Bob Davies Jones. Okay, well, that means some things I can't do. Other things I might be able to do better than Bob, but some things I can't do. And I think that was one of the things that Chuck thought this was a nearly impossible task. And therefore you had to be as good as you could possibly be about everything you could possibly learn about. If you wanted to actually be what you said you wanted to be.
Do you think that Chuck elevated the field through his insistence on this excellence?
I think so, because I think Chuck it was hard to be around the guy without recognizing that, he did that. And he was willing to, at times somewhat forcefully, point out shortcomings in work that was done by other people.
And Harold is being very, very generous here. Let's just all remember what it was like to be around Chuck and have him just flatly say bullshit.
Okay, so let me tell you,
he would want us to put that out there on the table.
Okay, right. And so here's one of the things that Chuck told me very early in our relationship. In science, your friend is the person who tells you, your work sucks. I want to be your best friend. And that was, I remember that from Chuck, and Chuck's friendship in science was sometimes a little, and you talk about, being afraid. I mean, that was, I told the story on Facebook about, when I first actually met Chuck. I was my PhD was going to be on the role of convection in the development of bombs off the East Coast. That was what I was going to be working on. And so I went to a workshop on operational meteorology in Halifax in 1987 to get up to speed on bombs. And that turned out to be right after the Edmonton tornado. And so they'd had some stuff about the Edmonton tornado, and I made some comments to some of the people there about that. And I was doing this modeling, and they were going to have the first summer severe weather coordinators meeting that January. And they invited me to speak, which was like, gosh, you guys are idiots. And the other invited American was Chuck. And Chuck gave a talk on Monday, and I was so happy when I found out he was leaving before my talk, because I was so scared of what it was going to be like, because I just wasn't sure what was going to happen. But on that Monday evening, and this is, one of those days you don't realize your life just changed. That happens. We were we were going to go to a Greek restaurant in East Montreal, and as a group of us, and Chuck and I were not actually prepared to be walking outside for a long time, especially our footwear was a problem. And we got to and we get over to the place, we get out of the metro, we walk a few blocks, and we're supposed to have gone far enough to get to the restaurant, and there's no restaurant. And our host, or the guy who was leading us, goes into a news dealer, and he comes out and he says something in French, and the francophones all laugh. And he says, we turned the wrong way at the metro. We have to walk back the same distance across. So we're outside, like walking for like a half an hour, and it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And we get into the restaurant, and we got a table for 12. We go and we sit down, and I just happened to sit next to Chuck. And that was the beginning of having a conversation about what things were going on. The best part is at the end, our host speaks to the manager of the restaurant and makes some comment, and he again, there's laughter from the francophones, and he turns where we're all going. The non-francophones are going, what the heck's going on? And he says, I told him it was really good. I'd made a reservation for 12 because the restaurant was crowded. And the guy says, I didn't have a reservation for 12. I always have a table open because we get big groups that come in here all the time. And we walked outside the restaurant. We looked down the street, and there was another Greek restaurant down the other corner across the street. And we'd gone to the wrong restaurant. And then a month later at the Severe Storms Conference in Baltimore, I was giving my first and that was my second professional presentation. The first one had been the Friday before at McGill University. And the month later, I presented at the Severe Storms Conference in Baltimore, and Chuck came up to me and said, how about if you come to Norman for a year for a postdoc before you get your faculty position? A lot of researchers don't like to talk to forecasters. You do. You're willing to talk to them. And that's how I began. And I didn't dream at the time I'd be, if you would ask me in 1989 when I was applying for the postdoc, if I'd be here, now, there was no way. I didn't think that would happen. I thought I'd be off somewhere else by now. At some point, I might have returned, but that was Chuck. And like I said, we worked together for so long. It was, this for Kim, I won't say, we didn't do as much, and maybe it wasn't quite the same way as Kahneman and Tversky, but, we talked about a ton of stuff related to science, some of which eventually ended up in published papers, some of it never did. But we just talked about what we thought were interesting problems for a decade.
Harold, I loved what you said about being glad Chuck was gone. When you got to get up and give your talk in 2004, I went out to Kansas, Harper County, Sumner County, with Gene Roden, and saw a bunch of tornadoes in one day. And the next year, someone asked me to speak at the Mississippi State Conference, and I had my little presentation, and I was so excited about it. And I walked up on the stage, and I looked down, and Chuck was in the front row. And I didn't know him. He didn't really know me from Adam at that point, but I thought, everything I'm going to say, this man is absolutely going to tear it apart.
Right. And I think one of the things is that Chuck was one of the things that's different about Chuck and I is that I don't necessarily process during people's talks as fast as Chuck does. Chuck, he could put everything together and go, here's a good question. And he really wouldn't mean it as wouldn't mean it to be an aggressive,
exactly
question. But that was just his way of, it was probably worse if you didn't get a question from Chuck.
No, that's
at that
right.
point, he didn't think you were worthwhile interacting with and developing. I did take advantage of him once for that. When I did the talk on how I was starting to do signal detection theory to look at tornado warning performance. I knew Chuck would have a question, and I knew Chuck's hand would be up first. And so I had added a slide at the end of the talk. And so I get done with the talk, and the Chuck raises his, and I say, Chuck, and I said, wait a minute, I forgot one more slide. And I don't know if you've ever seen the despair.com, the demotivators posters. that have like phrases like, it's always darkest just before it gets pitch black. Those kinds of things. Well, there was this one that was called cluelessness. And it was, there are no stupid questions, but there are a lot of inquisitive idiots. And so that
show title.
That's right. Yes. And so I said, and so I put that up and I said, Chuck, your question, Chuck? And he just looked at me with, and he knew that I knew it was going to happen and that I had planned that slide just for him. And he, yeah, it was a special relationship, and it's been that way for years. And we had, he started slowing down.
I love the show he did with Gene Rodin. It was back about the time we started this show, and it was a must listen every week. Because I think
I was on with that a couple of times. Yeah.
That was such a great show, and it was always Chuck Unplugged for 2 hours.
Oh yeah, you better believe it. But I think that when I think the renewal of my connection with him. I think it was his birthday 2 years ago, and it was at his house, and I just sat on the couch and talked to him for a while. And his daughter had made a comment before, a couple of weeks before, about how he was really slowing down. And I'm sitting there talking to him. I'm going, I don't see it. I just don't see him slowing. This is not, I don't see anything. And she came up to me. We saw her a couple of weeks later, and she goes, "That was the best Dad has been in a year, when he was sitting talking to you." And it's like, okay, we're gonna have to do that more often. And we ended up getting the Friday afternoon club together, started together to try to hide the fact that this was pretty much just get Chuck out seeing people. And we would always arrange it. I talked to Chuck, and and it was always Chuck. You could just see. He comes, he wasn't quite as full as he had been, but he was pretty close. And I was really fortunate that, his health issues began the weekend after the AMS Severe Storms Conference this year. And thankfully, the secretary had bought my tickets to come home from Virginia Beach a little early. And so I basically drove from the airport to the restaurant where everybody was, and my wife's across the table, and Chuck's next to me, and then his wife, and we were talking about some of the stuff I picked up at the conference we were going to do, and some of the stuff Kim, some of the stuff about ethics we've been talking about. And he was really engaged, and he was excited. And then I'm going, I still see this guy, and I'll admit, one of those things that I didn't realize I was missing in some sense, probably out of my life. At one level that, and I, there have been some things that got me a little down in the last few years about, going on. And my wife, when I'm talking to Chuck, my wife just says to Chuck, goes, "Look at him. He's excited again." And I realized, oh my gosh, she's right. Chuck does the same thing for me that I apparently did for him. And that's going to be tough.
Well, Bill asked me to run the show, and now you're making me cry. So that's good.
Well, that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the plan, but
keep doing it anyway.
But it's a benefit. Yeah.
That right there was. I'm so glad that we caught that and that you were able to share that about you two, and you clearly had just a very special relationship. And I'm so sorry that he's gone for you. I think there's a lot of us who have stories to share, and I'd love to hear. Other panelists I know, Span said that he has remembrances too. I think I just want to share something I've been thinking about. You started this show talking about so many people who you were with in those years. And some are still with us, some are gone, some have retired, some have passed. But the way that I'm experiencing this in sort of the generation behind you, I'm the generation you helped to bring up, is a pretty intense kind of pressure to carry the torch. And I don't, I don't, I often don't feel like I can. But I think this is something we are, people coming up now are feeling called to do. And the more that you can share, the more that we can carry.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that I never thought of carrying a torch, and I don't think Chuck ever did either. To me, and this was a line that I know I mentioned to Chuck at some, this came up at times. There was a line that it's in the longest day in the book and in the movie, and there's enough witnesses that it really happened. And it's I can't think of his first name now, but Roosevelt. So Teddy Roosevelt's son was the only general to go on shore on D-Day, and they had landed. They had not landed where they were supposed to in Omaha, in part because the wave forecast was incorrect and the waves were higher than what the forecast had said. But that's another episode. And they got to the place and they realized they're a quarter mile from where they're supposed to, from their objective, and they're supposed to. The debate is, do we walk along the beach in front of all the Germans to go get the place we're supposed to get, or do we just start fighting right where we are? And after he thought for a while, and he said, after a minute, he said, "Gentlemen, the war starts here. So, you just fight the battle that's in front of you. And hopefully, eventually, the idea is we're going to get to the goal down the road. But I certainly never thought about getting to a really long goal. It was just take the next step, and we'll see where we are then, and we'll look around and we'll move towards the next location, and just try to be." I think Chuck was the same way. It was like, I want to work on this problem. I want to, down deep, we both wanted to understand everything that had to do with tornadoes, their forecasting, and their impacts, and all that. That's all we really cared about. But that was so much stuff. We knew we couldn't do it all at one time. So I'm going to do this little bite. Well, and here's somebody next to me. I got Bob Davies Jones next to me. Hey, let's look at vorticity generation and downdrafts. Boom, that's good. Got that one. I got Alan Murphy coming in to talk to us. Well, how do we actually get value out of forecasts? All those kinds of things happened just because that was what we could do then. And I could look at it now and go, well, I've done some things, but I haven't come close to getting the goal of understanding everything there is. And I'm okay with that. Hopefully I've moved hopefully I've moved myself somewhat further forward, and some other people a little bit further forward, and they'll find new ways to go that I didn't even dream of doing. That's what you should think about, Kim.
James Spann, you had a really special relationship with Chuck. And when it first formed, I was pretty amazed by it because he was a well-known unbeliever. And you struck, and I'd love you to tell some stories about that, James, because you never really talked about it. But you and Chuck struck up a beautiful friendship.
We were the odd couple.
Yeah,
it was. We were the odd couple. And I met him, I want to say probably 30 years ago. But listen, I grew up reading AMS preprints, Chuck Doswell, Severe Local Convective Storms. Everything I've learned about severe local convective storms, well, maybe not everything, but maybe 95% of it, it came from Chuck Doswell or Harold Brooks, okay? One of the two. And Harold, I hope you understand what you've done for this enterprise and for us practitioners. But I took a friend of mine to one of the Mississippi State conferences, the one they do in the spring, the symposium, a guy by the name of Matthew Seals. Matthew lost his 8-year-old child in an F5 tornado in Birmingham, April 8th, 1998. The whole family, they were lofted. Matthew and his wife, 3 children. Somehow 4 of the 5 survived. The 8-year-old child lost his life, Nathan Seals. Matthew, my friend, he's in a wheelchair. He's permanently paralyzed. He'll never walk again unless there's a miracle. And I decided to pull kind of a trick at my talk at Mississippi State. I was showing skew tees and, all this thermodynamic stuff and the setup for this severe weather outbreak. And I said, wait a minute. Can I stop for just a minute? Let me show you what really matters. And I just stopped and I brought Matthew Seals, and he came out there in that wheelchair. And he talked about his experience and what happened to him and his family. You could hear a pin drop. And I knew that Chuck was at this conference, okay? Before Matthew went out there, I said, now, Matthew, there's going to be a tall guy in a cowboy hat sitting on the front row. Now, if he raises his hand or if he says something kind of harsh, it's okay. That's just who he is. But, Chuck, he didn't raise his hand, and he didn't say anything harsh or ugly. When it was finished, he came up and he hugged me, and he hugged Matthew. And I'll never forget that. I will never forget that. And I think that event started kind of our close relationship, and that deep down inside that gruff exterior, and he can be scary. Listen, Bill Murray, I've done that. I presented a paper at a conference with Chuck Doswell sitting on the stinking front row in the cowboy hat. And it's like, before I start talking, I say, anybody have any questions when this is over? Anybody can ask anything except you. And I point at him. But, there's something deep inside, Chuck, and I know that something happened in Vietnam. I don't know. I don't know a lot. The one night he almost told me some things, and he stopped. But I know that set him back in a lot of ways, and he still struggled with that until the day he died. But having said that, he was a great seeker and a great friend, and he really did care about people. A lot of people say, "Man, Harold's mean," or not Harold, but Chuck's mean to me, and but I will say deep down inside, he was a wonderful man that loved people, and he knew that his work was important, and he could help people like me, help prepare me for what I do to save somebody's life. And he understood that purpose. And whenever I saw him, I would hug him and he would hug me, and we would just laugh and have the greatest time together. And I will miss that. I'll miss that a lot. I miss his wisdom. It's like J.B. Elliott, our colleague here, when he passed away. And so I want to pick up the phone and talk with J.B. About this winter storm tomorrow, because he's done there. He's been there. He's done that. During a big tornado threat, I want to pick up the phone and talk with Chuck. What do you think? And I won't have that anymore. And it's just, I don't know. It's kind of hard. Do you guys want to hear some audio real quick? Jen, do you want to set up the audio here real quick? Is that okay?
Yeah. So from what I can tell, Chuck was on the show 7 times. And so the first show was on November 2nd, 2009, called A Legend Joins Us. And so the 3 clips that I have for tonight, and we'll listen to the first one here, all from that show. And I started listening to the last show too, because y'all, I did not know him. I was honored, though, to be on that final show as a panelist, to be able to ask him a question, to talk about his experience with the Pampa tornado. And I went back and watched all that, and I loved it. And I am loving these stories, because now I do feel like I'm getting a chance to know him a lot more. But it was neat to go back and listen to these clips. The first one, James, if you want to play it, this is you tossing a question to Chuck about the false alarm rate. You were talking about it 15 years ago.
Nothing has changed. Literally, the first show we did, I talked about FAR in like 2006. So let's go back and listen to episode 197.
Chuck, the false alarm ratio with tornado warnings in some of the Weather Service offices is up in the 85 to 90% range. Do you think that is acceptable, and how do we improve that?
Well, that's a real interesting question. I'd say some offices have a tendency to play a CYA game.
Yep.
And that's not necessarily the same in all offices. But there are certain tendencies that these offices have to overwarn just to be on the safe side. And, I don't support that. But if you really want that to be changed, that has to be a decision that, in effect, is forced on them from above. Because that's generally an office policy that's set by the local staff. And the only way you're going to get them to change it is forcing them to change it.
So it seems like the emphasis with a lot of the Weather Service offices, it's POD instead of FAR.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's look at it this way. Nobody dies in a false alarm. False alarms don't kill anybody. And if you happen to not have a warning out because you're playing it conservative and some weird tornado happens and by bad luck someone ends up being killed by it and you didn't have a warning out, then everybody understands that basically your ass is grass. And somebody's going to be the lawnmower. So there's kind of an unwritten policy that we're going to forgive false alarms a lot more readily than we're going to forgive failures to detect, and especially when something bad happens.
Wow. He makes good points. He makes great points.
And not subtly
Recognize
either.
that voice, Harold?
Yeah. I tell you, and one of the things that I for a number of years there was a flash flood forecasters course taught at the National Weather Service Training Center, and it was 2 weeks long, and there were 2 days taught by the lab component, and it had been Bob Maddox and Charlie Chappell that started it, and it when Bob came to Norman, it became Norman did it. The NSSL did it, and I think Don Burgess did it a couple of times, and then Chuck started doing it, and we decided I needed to revamp it. And Chuck decided to start doing that after I got to the lab. And so I got dragged into redoing those 2 days. And I think this was, and James, I think this comes back to probably why Chuck liked you. Okay. It comes back to this is that, they would hear on the 8 days that the lab people didn't talk, they'd get, magic number kind of forecasting, if, look at this thing. And if it's 8, flash flood, it's 12 now. Oh, that's even worse. And we would go in, and actually the first thing we would do, and I taught it, Chuck handed it completely over to me for its last several times to be taught. And the first thing we did was we go in and we'd ask we had 24 students in the class. We'd ask them, how many of you worked a killer flash flood event? And we'd go through you'd pull it up and you find out that most guys on shift would get 1 or 2 of them in their career. And we would point out to them, that means you got to get it right the very first time. You may not ever get to repeat that chance again. And if you haven't done everything in your power, forecasting wise, to do that, how are you going to feel if somebody dies? And you could see the looks on everybody's faces, like, oh man, that's God. And then at the end of the class, we did a thing where we Chuck and I put this together. We had 6 teams of 4 forecasters that were going to make probability of so much rain exceeding some high level, and then what's the maximum amount of rain you're going to find on the day. And we'd have 2 teams working on the same case. And the first day they get up there and the first 2 teams present, and they've got 70% chance it'll exceed 3 inches, and likely 8 inches is the maximum amount. And we pull out the observed map, and it's 0.1400 of an inch. You go, nothing happened today. And they're all just like, oh, that's not fair. That's not fair. We go, when you're actually forecasting, what's going to happen today? This isn't like undergraduate, your synoptic lab. We just had a couple of lectures about snow. There's going to be snow happening on your lab. And you can see then the next 2 teams, because we actually had 3 consecutive days. And the next, you can see them all of a sudden go, man, let's drop our numbers. So we get down to low probabilities of a big event occurring. Of course, it's 9 inches that day. And the big point was, the really big days look a lot like ordinary days. And I think one of the things that comes back to the stuff you talked about at the beginning, actually, with the local TV stuff, one of the real challenges we face is when we start to I think one of the things that Chuck and I bonded over science-wise was we cared about what's the role of the human being in forecasting. And if human beings stop doing things and we start taking away what they do and reduce their involvement because we're going to trust the models or whatever all the time, and people stop doing those things, they start losing their experience. And they stop recognizing today is the biggest day of my career. I mean, James, I know you. We've talked about April 27th, 2011, and what went on, and you did everything you possibly could, and I know that. I mean, yeah, and how do you feel about it anyway? And that's the kind of thing. But if you'd gone in that day or that whole week and just gone, hey, boy, it's a big day today. You would probably feel a whole lot worse if you didn't think you had given an effort to do it. And I think that was always one of the things we wanted out of Chuck, and we tried to get the forecasters to think, man, you have to work hard on the ordinary days because they're not that different than the biggest days. And if you haven't done that work, you aren't going to be ready to recognize this is the. And we had a friend at a local forecast office. I won't mention where. Had a big day back in the 1980s before it was easy to look at radar from other offices, and he had done everything right. He had nailed the forecast. And then he realizes they aren't getting reports in severe storms reports from the office next door. Maybe I've done something wrong. Maybe I've done, I don't know what's going on. And I'm going to wait till I get a report before I put a warning out. And the first report he gets is from a highway patrol officer right on the edge of his county warning area of a half-mile wide tornado on the ground moving northeast at 60 miles an hour just southwest of a small town. And he says, wow. I knew officially the warning was out before the tornado hit the town. I also knew nobody knew about it. He says, every morning when I shave, I look at myself in the mirror and I think about that day, and I know I never get to do it again. And we would tell that story, and Chuck was like, yeah, we're trying to scare you as forecasters because this is what you're doing is desperately hard, and you probably got into this because you're interested in the weather. But down deep, we care about the outcomes. And Chuck liked everybody who cared about outcomes. That was the bottom line.
One of the talks I did was, are you ready for one of the defining days in your career? And he came up, we talked a long time about that. And you communicated it so well, Harold, but he liked the human element of this, from research to operational humans. It makes a difference. And we talked a lot about that, but you're exactly right. You nailed it perfectly. All right, Jen, let's set up the second one.
So the second one, Bill asked Chuck about advice for students because he was going to do a talk at the College of DuPage.
Now, you're going to be at the College of DuPage next week or later this week, is that right?
I believe Thursday morning.
And what's going to be your advice for those young meteorologists up in Chicago?
Well, it's pretty much the same advice that I give young meteorologists everywhere. My presentation is going to be on the history of severe storms forecasting and research, basically. And there's one theme that comes through my understanding of that history, and that is that individual people can make a difference. And if you look at the history, there's been a clash of wills, and somebody in that clash, somebody wins. And if you're willing to fight for what you believe in and work hard to try to make something good happen as a result of what you believe in, then the possibility that you can make a difference is there. So my advice to them is don't ever give up and don't ever let anybody steal your dream.
Wow. All right, let's go to number 3, Jen, while we got the audio board up.
All right, number 3, he tells the story about his hat.
Oh, yeah.
I think the important question is, what's the story behind the hat?
Yeah, it's become my trademark, and the story behind it is that back when I was working in Kansas City, my hair was starting to get kind of thin. I knew I was going to have to wear a hat to keep the top of my head from burning in the sun. And my wife suggested, she says, well, you're a pretty tall guy. I mean, you can probably wear a cowboy hat. Because I would have never dreamed of doing that. And so she went out and bought my first cowboy hat. And I started wearing it. And one of the things that happened with it that I noticed right away was that when I was wearing it, people who wanted to find me could find me easily in a crowd. And at the same time, the people who wanted to avoid me could easily avoid me. So that seemed like a pretty good deal to me.
Yeah.
And so I've kept it as a trademark. And every time I don't wear it, as Tim recently mentioned, I get a lot of grief about not wearing it. And so, I get questions like, do you wear it in bed and, in the shower and whatever? But I'm sure many people would be disappointed. I don't even wear it storm chasing. It's not exactly very practical when you're out on a storm chase. It's a good way to lose it.
Yeah.
But it has become a trademark, and people expect it. But you have my wife to thank for it.
Now we know the rest of the story. I got to pull up one more.
One more?
Yeah, go ahead, Harry. No, that's it. That's all the audio we have.
I just wanted to say one thing that, Kim as a student met Chuck. And I think one of the things that I was next door to Chuck for a long time, and I think Chuck was a difficult advisor just because of his approach to the academic system. And because he basically expected you to work as hard as he had worked. Which, let's be honest, that's not very easy to do. But he was an absolute wonderful non-advisor to students, non-official advisor. If a student, because he cared about people who wanted to do things. And when it was just, hey, I'm going to talk to you because you seem interested in doing good work. He was fabulous. And he was a much better resource for that than he was as an official advisor, from my perspective. But because he was, anything he could do to help that next generation move forward was he would do it without any. I mean, I'm sort of on the old end of that next generation, as I think about it. But he wanted students to think there was and we saw the thing heard from the thing in College of Page. He wanted students to think there was a future, and that they had a role in it.
He did, and he was, demanding in that, but it was because he wanted you to succeed and to do great things, because you had a dream and this is what was necessary to actually achieve it. It wasn't just going to happen. Like, you don't just happen into the influence of the dream that you have. I'll tell a funny story about Chuck. So I think he did. I met him in 2004 as a summer, or I used to know as Harold. Harold and Dan Sutter's summer student. And Chuck also participated in the RAU program, and he came to all of our talks. He really appreciated my work because it was economics based. And he was, like you said, Harold, really interested in the impacts piece. So later on, when I was applying to graduate programs, he was happy to sit down with me and talk things through. I came to OU for their visiting students weekend, and I remember sitting down. He had a big glass of wine, and we were with all these graduate students and all their potential advisors and everything. And I went off with Chuck, in part because I was an oddity in meteorology, and I wasn't going to go off and talk to the dynamics professor and, so on. I was looking for a different angle, and I wasn't sure I really was going to fit in at OU. I had a horrible imposter syndrome, something that wasn't named yet, but Harold would come to know quite well in me before it was named as a syndrome. So he sat down with me and told me, the thing is, when you get to those classes, just, you shouldn't worry too much about those exams. Like, if you're studying properly through the whole semester and you're really taking in the material, we have to know everything. Like Harold was saying, we have to know everything to do this job well. So don't set your standards low. You're interdisciplinary, but that doesn't mean you don't have to know everything. But find that person in the class who is asking all the questions and sit down with them and say, I want to study with you, and study with them and have all the notes memorized, like be able to, from memory, have everything. And then going into the exam, you should have no trouble. So I went into my dynamics class the first day. I ultimately did accept going to OU. And there was one guy sitting in the front row, had a like duct taped up 5-star binder, looked like he'd seen some things. And he asked like 6 questions on tensor notation. And I was like, this is my man. This is my guy. This is my Chuck informed guy. And that person was Ariel Cohen, who is now the MIC of the forecast office in Los Angeles. And if you've seen any weather news of late, the last 2 weeks, he's been on every national, international news, thing covering the Los Angeles fires and doing an absolutely remarkable job with all of that. I'm so grateful that Los Angeles has someone like him. But my friendship with Ariel has been very long and is very deep. He was one of the groomsmen in my wedding, and it all started from Chuck encouraging me to be his friend and look for that person. And in our friendship, Ariel's one of those people like Chuck who is very, very, very perfectionistic, especially early in his graduate days, very, very comprehensive. And no human could keep up with him. I used to pretend to compete with him, but I couldn't really. And I think I brought humanity, and friendship. And in there, we had a very wonderful relationship that it wouldn't have happened without Chuck. And I told Ariel I was going to share that tonight. He's very despondent at losing Chuck. Chuck was very, very special to him because he himself was so driven. And I think Chuck was one of the only people who could match his energy and give him that inspiration when he was just that intense. Harold, you've taken your mic down. You had so many things flash across your face and all that.
Yeah. Well, so Ariel ended up being my PhD student. I was his advisor, and Ariel's actually responsible for a rule in the department in the School of Meteorology about the length that's allowed to write your journal exam response. It's not supposed to be more than 25 pages now because Ariel wrote 125 and apologized he hadn't covered everything. And so, but I get it. And something else though that Chuck would tell you if you were a student was, don't give me any excuse about that I didn't have a good professor. It's your job to learn the material, and whether you have a good professor or not, if your success depends on having a never-ending string of good teachers and good professors, you're not going to go very far. Whether you had a good professor or not, you were supposed to learn the stuff anyway.
Right. Yep. You have to find a way. And often your peers are going to be that way. Now, James Adelot, you have mentioned that you have had some exposure to him. I think you wished you could have, interacted with him more, but even yet, just the wisdom he shared, because he was a prolific writer. He was present in spaces in a very, everywhere he was very profound in person. And then once social media was born, boy, did he have a lot of things to share. He had a whole bevy of essays to inform the world with. Share your experience of Chuck.
When you see Chuck at conferences, when I finally got to a TV station that would send me to those, I don't think it's too small to say bigger than life at all, because you would see the cowboy hat come in the door and this hush would come through the whole conference hall. And I remember the first time I was at a conference and saw Chuck, I said, I've got to muster up all my courage and go say hello to him. I'm just a TV guy in Tulsa, and I just want to tell him how much he's meant to me, just reading some of those papers and not understanding half of it at the time, and probably still don't. And you already said bullshit, so I can say it again. Once he realized you weren't full of bullshit, he was so gracious and kind and wise and sharing. And it's like James said, that once he realized that your motives weren't full of that emoji, that he was so just generous. He was such a kind-hearted man once he realized you weren't full of it. And to hear Harold say, a bad professor does not excuse you from not learning the material. Yes, I can hear it. I mean, everything. It's just that don't make dumb excuses. And that's kind of, that'll go back into my picture of the week that we talk about, because it's both funny and it's totally on point for Dr. Doswell, because it's just, you know, don't be lazy. No excuses. Do this the right way. And what you said earlier too, and this it gets a little bit away from him, but on to this current generation of scientists in this. And I mean, we realize that we're riding the coattails of these titans that in the science. And that's an enormous responsibility. And I hope everyone in the current generation understands just how where we were when Dr. Doswell's generation started and where they left the science for us. And gosh, that's intimidating. And you all have triggered every ounce of imposter syndrome. And I'm so glad I didn't go to grad school in meteorology and pick something that I could write instead of math. So,
yeah, sorry, go ahead, James.
So, all right. So I got to share a picture here. I think you guys can see that. Kim, do you recognize that?
Oh, I
that
sure do.
place?
I was in the room for this. This is the National Weather Center, room 1313, the big hall.
Yes, and so we did the show live from that room, and notice I don't know who lined up the people here, but notice that you got me and Chuck down there by ourselves on the end, and that's trouble. I mean, I'll tell you right now, that's trouble. I mean, he can totally whip me into a frenzy, and this poor young girl down there, this college student. Came up and she got on the mic and she just wanted to talk to us a little bit and maybe get some advice, and Chuck just lit into her, and he got me into we both just we said the right things, but we didn't say it in the proper way, if that makes any sense. And it was over. I felt so bad about that. And her name is Elise Smith, and literally about 3 months after this, I was here in my little closet and I looked out in the hall, and there she was in the hall right there. I'm thinking, oh, she's come back to haunt me or something. What is this? And as it turned out, she actually interned here that summer, and she has gone on to have an amazing career in Buffalo. Now she's with the ABC affiliate in Houston, Texas. But in fact, it's going to be, I'll tell you now, that's going to be my pick of the week. It's that episode. You can go back and watch the replay of that. But we were the two troublemakers in the room, in the class. When they put Chuck and I together, trouble. But that was but I apologized profusely to Elise, and she's accepted that, and we're buddies now. So that's good.
You know, something that you've raised, Span, maybe Harold can expound on it. Chuck could be a difficult individual. He sometimes, you've mentioned it, you know, offhandedly a little bit, but there were things he took some pleasure in rallying against directly, like bureaucratic institutions.
Gosh, I said overrunning. I said overrunning one night. That triggered this man.
Well, if you said triggered, it would have triggered him.
you couldn't drive a 10-penny nail up his backside with a sledgehammer. I mean, he reamed me out. And I will never, ever. In fact, I think that's the first time I've uttered that word in public since he reamed me out after that. Wow.
I think that okay, one of the things that Chuck had what I would view as a healthy respect for management, which means basically none. And I remember him once a year. You know, he would bring up the question. He goes, one of the great philosophical questions within NOAA is, which management is worse, the Weather Service management OAR, the research management. And he would start off on this thing and say, I finally have decided that it's, that Weather Service is worse because OAR management basically just ignores you and doesn't actually care. They don't do anything. Whereas Weather Service will actively try to screw things up. And it's just like, okay, there's a thing. Yeah. So he, and he just, he didn't, I mean, I think a lot of this was, Chuck cared about what the real mission was, which was science. And the only good manager was one who just essentially didn't get in the way of doing science. And that was his thing. Because he would say, you look around at Weather Service offices and you'll see some places that, you have some managers who are, if it's not specifically stated in the rules, we don't do it. And other managers who would say, if it's not specifically stated in the rules that we don't do it, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. And it says, if we get in trouble, we'll deal with it. And that was sort of his thing of looking for places and looking for people who were willing to help people try to do something interesting and high quality. And if you would support doing that quality stuff, Chuck loved you. If you got in the way of doing quality, Chuck would not be particularly nice to you, and he didn't care whether you thought it was polite or not.
And is this why, when you look back at Chuck's career, he is somewhat of a, not a lone gun, but he didn't rise through a bureaucratic rank of any kind as a scientist. And it's interesting to think about that he wasn't some like really big fed, and part of it is that he had this challenge of balancing the science he wanted to do with navigating the systems that produce it.
I'm going to try to get a cat over here to see if I can compete with your dog. But I think one of the things, I mean, for a few years, he was head of the Mesoscale Applications Group when it first started, which was the group that ended up doing a lot of work here at the lab with SPC. And that was when it was just like 3 or 4 of us. And being head of our group was pretty much just, hey, everybody do what they want to do and, do good stuff. And then it was actually, they named Joe Schaefer as the director, and he knew he couldn't work with Joe, and that person was going to have to work with Joe a lot. And so he came to me and said, I'm not going to be the head anymore. I told Maddox to make you the head. And that was because he didn't want to do management at all. And and maybe that's why I picked some of that up. I mean, I was happy doing management when it was, let's try to do science. And then it became much more of, well, you got to manage budget. I didn't want to do that anymore. And I don't think that's a good use of my whatever talents I have to do budget. If someone wants to talk to me about an exciting science topic, man, I'm talking to you. But if you want to talk about, it's, $18,000 to do this and $17,000 to do this, which one are we going to do? It's like, I don't care. You don't do that. I mean, I refuse to be on our budget committee at church because I hate budget so much. Okay. And that was, and it's the same kind of thing. I just want to, you want to talk about what we're doing programmatically? Fine. I'll talk about that, but I don't want to talk about budget. And that's Chuck. It was like he didn't want to do that, and that limits you in NOAA. I mean, Chuck's attitude towards management, it's possible it cost him a promotion because there were management people who didn't like him. But I think he was okay living with that.
Sorry, everyone who gets to watch on YouTube is watching the dog chew my hair. Puppy. Oh my word. I'm keeping the dog away from the sleeping children. This is the marital balance we've struck this evening. But I for better and worse, probably I've always been so inspired by Chuck's forthrightness. And I think I've always been the same. And I as much as he could be difficult, you knew exactly what he was thinking. You knew exactly where you stood. And I prefer that to the small p politics any day. I share his I won't say disdain for that level of politics, but it's just we're when we're a science agency with a science mission, it's something that I think we all have to navigate within ourselves. What degree do we want to deal with each of these issues, whether separately or conjoined? And he very much fell on that side. And I myself take the view that the best science policy is going to come from the best science. And much like him, I am very forthright. And there are some who find that, very endearing. They love knowing exactly what I'm thinking, and some who less relish it. But I think I can see my career taking some of the same, the same consequences. But I would rather that. I would rather that. And seeing the outpouring of love that he's had, come forward in the last 2 days, he used his influence, for love, and he really did care. And that's how he chose to show his care, was through that inspiration of science.
And just to be really honest, we like him here. He's better liked in Europe. Yeah, I mean, he was a big part of the beginning of the European Severe Storms Conference. That's one thing I can share with him, that we were big supporters of that. And if you look at the stuff, I mean, any severe weather forecasting that takes place outside of the United States, Chuck has had a huge part in that being done there. Europe, Australia, my gosh, Chuck's just been such a big part of that, and it's been neat seeing that they gave him the Soloviev Award from the European Geophysical Union, and he got the Doswell Award that I later got from the European Conference on Severe Storms, and that's been one of the groups I've really liked hearing from over the last couple of days, or all of our mutual friends that Chuck and I for a long time were, I've been to all of the European conferences. He went to almost all of them, and it was like, boy, you think he looks impressive when he walks into a conference in the U.S. Just kind of be in the vicinity when Chuck Doswell walked into the room on one of the UCSS with the hat on, because there was where you'd hear all these people who had only read things and had never seen him in person before, and all of a sudden there he is. And what he did forecaster training over there, did all kinds of work over there. I'll give a check. No, they gave him a lot of beer in the Czech Republic. It's much.
All right, so we got to take a break. We could carry on here all night. We have to take a quick break here. I do not have a report from Tony this week, but I've got Jen. And this week in tornado history, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about this southern winter storm action. Blizzard beaches going on here, but much more to come as WeatherBrains rolls along.
This week in tornado history, an outbreak of 86 tornadoes occurred on January 21st, 1999. There were 9 tornadoes rated F3, all but one in Arkansas, and there was also an F4 in the state. We have a summary at tornadotalk.com that looks at one of the F3s. This twister traveled 8 miles in 11 minutes through parts of White County, Arkansas. It developed 1 mile southwest of Beebe. The twister moved northeast through the town, causing tremendous damage. The new Beebe Junior High School on Center Street had significant damage. The walls and roof collapsed into classrooms. A gym behind the school was demolished. After hearing of the approaching severe weather, a girls' basketball game was canceled at halftime, and the upcoming boys' game was called off. The tornado destroyed the gym a half hour later, and the building was empty. Damage occurred to the Beebe Fire Department and a church. 2 pickup trucks were flipped upside down on Hickory Street, and many old houses on Main Street were damaged or destroyed. The tornado left Beebe and moved toward McRae. Downed trees and building debris was found along Highway 367 between the two towns. In McRae, the old fire station lost a wall, and the new fire station was destroyed. Several mobile homes were overturned at that new fire station. The post office sustained heavy damage. All natural gas in town was shut off due to leaks. The tornado dissipated about 1 mile northeast of McRae. At least 29 injuries occurred from this event, and sadly, there were 2 fatalities in Beebe: 2-month-old Kirk McAfee and Flo Taylor, age 50.
Hey, 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 just maybe we have a little email in the inbox tonight.
All righty, we did get some email this week. I want to thank those who sent a couple of YouTube videos. One was of a Guatemalan volcano, and then also YouTube of a meteorite strike on a home security camera. So thank you for those that came in. And we also had a question that came in this evening about reliable platform sources. So there's been a cause of concern regarding reliable platform sources like Instagram, X, Facebook, Twitch, TikTok, because some people like to overhype certain events. And the question is, which one is the more reliable platform? And I thought, James, you could take this because I think it's a combination. There's the platform, and then there's the person behind the keyboard who's giving you the information on the platform because you're on all the platforms and you are a reliable source. So, how would you answer that?
Well, I don't know. Listen, I know enough about social media to be dangerous. But having said that, half of it's the algorithm. Most people are not going to go to your profile, your Facebook page, your TikTok account. They're just going to see what's in their feed. And so the question is, how is the algorithm distributing that information to you? And it's different for every platform. And the problem is the algorithm changes almost every day, and you can't keep up with it. So all you can do is just try and put it out there, you know, engage with people. If they ask questions, answer them and be responsive and be there consistently and be there when people need you, whether it's Saturday morning at 5 or Tuesday night at 9. And I think as they consume more of your products, it shows up more in the algorithm and they see more of it. So, but in terms of reliability, it's all a matter of the individual or the entity. But it just seems to me that Facebook is still probably the first place I would go if I was on the socials trying to find some weather information. Just my opinion.
Excellent. Thank you, James. Thank you for your emails. Email at weatherbrains.com. Get those to us and make sure you put your name and your email address so we can get back to you if we're not able to get to you on the show. Back to you, James.
So we have winter storm warnings in effect tonight, all the way from the southern tip of Texas to Charleston, South Carolina, Houston, Lake Charles, New Orleans, Mobile, Pensacola. Goodness gracious. And I wish Troy was here because we could kind of go to our Texas correspondent to see how things are unfolding out there. But it looks like there might be a few spots in there that could pick up 3, 4, 5 inches of snow at very low latitude. So that obviously that's the talk of the community around here tonight. Could we have snow on the beach at Gulf Shores, Fort Walton Beach, Panama City Beach, Galveston? Pretty good chance. We'll find out. This is a case where it's going to be very interesting to see what the atmosphere delivers. But that's obviously the big thing. And the other big thing, it's the cold. We've talked about that. It's all your fault, Jen, for leaving the back door open. So thank you for doing that. Again, we're going to go around the horn here and do picks of the week. This is where everybody's going to share something that is weather related. And I'll just start with mine. And again, it was the classic live show we did in Norman. This was episode number 509. And this was on the 29th of October, 2015. And I want to say that that was probably during a National Weather Association annual meeting, if just looking at the time here. But episode 509, we had just all kind of folks on the show. And goodness, it was an hour and 17 minutes of interesting discussion. Chuck was a panelist on that show, and again, it's just an interesting one to watch. So, and the show title was "I Can Give You a Finger," which was very appropriate for Chuck Doswell being on the show. So, that's my pick of the week. WeatherBrains episode number 509. All right, James, let's hit to you. Go to you before we have to do the 9 o'clock news.
And yeah, mine is from Chuck's personal page, and you can see a lot of the blog posts on that personal page were also labeled with "I moved this off my work page." So yeah, circling back to what Harold has said, and it is his meteorological pet peeves, and I want people to look at it, but I want people to understand the mindset of listing these and why they're there. And most of them are to steer people away from lazy thinking and kind of block of wood mentality. And you said it with overrunning, because I'd put in chat, I saw him get after somebody in a conference for that word that it doesn't describe anything. And isentropic lift describes the dynamic process.
The process.
Overrunning is a kinematic
yeah.
word. Doesn't tell you anything. All right.
I've heard
Stop
the
making me
lecture,
think.
but yeah, the guy was a critical thinker. I'm telling you, he didn't care really what anybody thought about what he said. He's just going to say the truth.
And he wanted everybody else to have those high standards as well, and to think and to care. So
right, and he wanted people to get it right. And I love that. He drove you to excellence in that. He could be a little intimidating, but by golly, he makes you better. So yeah, really intimidating. All right, Jen, give us a good pick of the week. What you got for us?
I wish I could, but for the first time this year, Foghorn for little old me.
Woo!
Yeah, let me hear it.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
There you go.
I think all those clips that you curated should count. Like,
should count.
Effort for this of all of us.
We can do it. We can add those for sure.
Only to 10. That's a Fire Sign Theater line, but Chuck and I would use each other as well. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, Kim, give us a pick of the week. Go.
All right. So my pick of the week is a very brief remembrance Ariel Cohen sent me, the MIC of LA that we were just talking about. My favorite memory, and there are so many, honestly, was when he came to Columbus in 2006 for our symposium. He went out of his way to spend time with me and talk to me. I mean, the guy is a world famous superstar, and here he is in my hometown. He was excited to see me. He wanted to catch up. I couldn't believe it. Ariel was a first-year grad student at this point, maybe graduating. I felt like I mattered. I don't remember a whole lot of what he said, but it made me feel like I was worth it. I remember in advanced, this is where things get very much the relationship between Chuck and Ariel. I remember in advanced forecasting techniques, we got into a minor quarrel about lapse rates calculations. Not to be arrogant, but he eventually realized I was correct about the denominator being a fixed bulk value, and he made it a deliberate point to articulate it in front of everyone. Who else does that? The typical response is to just look good, cover it up, and bury the person of lesser power. But no, his integrity and moral conscience were to acknowledge the truth openly and admit he was appropriately corrected. I miss him so much.
Wow. Excellent. All right, Harold Brooks, give us something good, something we don't know about. A pick. This could be anything weather related. Go.
Weather related? Okay. So, first of all, I've got a shirt on. It's about becoming a mathematical thinker, not a calculator, which is actually a shirt we use with our math the middle school math group that I checked. That's actually a Chuck thought to me. It's about becoming a thinker, not just calculating things. But my pick of the week, I've got two. I was given permission by Kim to give two papers, and so Jen, if you want to claim one of them, I'll got you covered. The first is the paper that we wrote that's the most cited thing I've ever been involved in, and it was flash flood forecasting and ingredients-based methodology. We reintroduced the concept of ingredients-based forecasting with Bob Maddox in 1995, I think that every time I say ingredients-based forecasting, what are the ingredients for some weather event, I'm going, dang it, Brooks, Doswell, and Maddox, 1995. And then the second one is the most looked at paper thing I've ever written. And this was, I think, on the other side of Chuck. And it's a conference paper from the Severe Storms Conference in 1996 called Case Analysis of a Killer Tornado in Kansas on 10 June 1938. And it's our effort to talk about the Wizard of Oz tornado. And we it happened that the Tom Grzoulis book of historical tornadoes had just come out, and Chuck had talked for a long time. He wanted to do a conference thing on the Wizard of Oz tornado. And I'm looking through the book, and it's like there's this tornado that there's most of the damage is at one farm, and there's one death in the tornado, and it's in June of 1938. And so we decided that's our tornado. MGM wouldn't give us permission to get screenshots. And so Chuck set up his camera in front of in front of his TV and would pause the VCR and take pictures of it. And at the conference, we sat the whole time and we just ran the first few minutes of the movie on and over again. And I think that was sort of our thing. And it turned out the weird thing is I actually have friends who are involved in the Wizard of Oz trivia community.
Wow.
This exists. And it turned out what we wrote turned out to matter to them because it helped determine the number of hours of time zone difference between Kansas and Oz because we had a time for the tornado occurrence.
Well, that's outstanding. Excellent. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Bill Murray, you're up. Go.
Yeah, James, I'm going to use Chuck's Chatter, one of his blogs, because there's some really neat posts on there. I'm going to use that as my pick of the week. It is a fascinating place to go back and read his thinking on a lot of different subjects, and I think you'll be enlightened by it. So that's what I'll share as my pick of the week for this week, James.
All right. Any promotions for future weeks, Bill?
Yeah, we've got some great shows coming up. Next week we're going to have Jen Walton and Heath Lawler talking about chasing, and we'll be getting ready for Jen's. What is she calling it, Kim? It has a word. It's spring training or something to that effect. Boot camp or something like chaser training. It's going to be really cool. So we're excited about that. I'm hoping we can, I've reached out to the watch duty folks in California for February 10th, but they're really, really busy right now and things are still very, very crazy. So it may be a while later. And I was interested to hear you talk about Ariel tonight. Maybe he can join us for some date in the future, maybe March 3rd, Kim, or something like that. But excited about Janice Huff joining us on the 17th. And our old friend Roger Edwards will join us on the 24th of February. And so those are just some of the shows that are coming up. And Show 1000 is coming into focus on the 17th. I'm getting more confident about it now and less heart palpitations every time I hear about it. So hopefully some interesting news will be coming out shortly about that show.
All right. Hey, Harold, thanks for coming on tonight. I know short notice, but thank you. You're the greatest.
Thank you very much for having me. As Kim asked me if it was too soon for me, and I honestly think it was. I probably needed this as much as you guys did. This was. There's, gosh, outside of family, has anybody ever affected me as much in my life as Chuck Doswell? And I think mostly for the good.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you. And again, for those that are watching, we're new here. If you're new, we're typically on the air every Monday night, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. The WeatherBrains YouTube channel. Most of you listen. But again, we just hope we honored Chuck. Thanks to all of you for listening. Have a great night and God bless.
Oh, thank you guys. And thank you, Harold. I'm grateful that you were able to come and that this truly wasn't too soon.
Yeah. I it's like, man, that's all I was refereeing a volleyball tournament this weekend. And so I got the message when I checked my phone after my first two matches on Saturday morning. Heather had called me or had texted me and they're trying to put together they were asking about, could I help put together a memorial service at the Weather Center? And that'll probably be in the middle of February. And I said, yeah. And so it was back and forth. And I got, I think I got a hold of you, were one of the people I told right away that, and then it was, by the time I got home on Saturday night, I'd seen that people started commenting. And so I was able to kind of process a little bit, especially during my last break on Sunday I had a couple hours off between matches. And I thought a lot sitting there in the gym about Chuck and what I was trying to think of what I would do. And, Kim, you saw the Facebook post and it was like, I finally realized I can't just, if I just tell the story of how we got started, because yeah, I think that kind of hit the thing that he was willing in some sense, take a chance on. I mean, he'd met me one day and didn't even hear me talk, but the fact that I was willing to talk to forecasters, and I guess then he did see the talk at the Sphere of Storms at the conference before the Sphere of Storms conference before the thing, but he was willing to take a chance on that, and it was and that Bob Maddox was willing to listen to him to say, we got to get this guy here, and I can't.
Yeah, it was more than just that you were willing to talk to forecasters.
Yeah, that was
conversation. Just how special you were.
Well, and I've been involved. One of the people who responded was the head of the Quebec Weather Center, who was one of the guys who was responsible for inviting me. And I made the comment about, I wasn't sure if they actually meant to invite me. I thought they had me confused with somebody else. And he was like, no, we knew who you were. And we knew who we were inviting, but I'm going, none of you, again, you hadn't even heard me give a presentation. You had no idea if I could even put a coherent sentence together, in one language. You knew you weren't going to get the second one, but
Harold, it's very obvious you're capable of putting together many coherent sentences. Often
okay. We come back to the fact that I don't believe in the existence of imposter syndrome, and this is the same kind of thing. It was just like, I just didn't know what I could do or not do, and then I tried it, and it was like, talking to forecasters was pretty dang good, and that I think one of the things I had with the Canadians was they made me feel very, very, very welcome immediately. And I had a lot better relationships for a long time with Canadian forecasters than I did with US forecasters, just because they were, they liked me. They seemed to like me, and they kept inviting me back.
But, all right. Well,